All right, let's jump right into Matthew chapter 9. Now, this chapter is just a whirlwind. It's packed with miracles, intense conversations, and it can honestly feel a little overwhelming to read for the first time. So what we're going to do today is slow things down a bit. We're going to walk through it together and really unpack the powerful message about who Jesus is and what he came to do.
So, to really get a handle on everything happening here, we're going to break it down into 4 big ideas. First, we'll look at Jesus' authority to forgive. Then, we'll see his radically new way of welcoming people. After that, we'll witness his incredible power over sickness and even death. And finally, we'll talk about his overwhelming compassion and how that calls for a response from us. Think of it as our roadmap for the chapter.
Okay, so we're starting with what is, without a doubt, the most jaw-dropping claim Jesus makes in this whole chapter. I mean, it's huge. He's not just about to heal someone's body. He's going to claim authority over our deepest, most fundamental problem, our sin.
So let me ask you, what do you think is mankind's most pressing problem? Is it sickness, poverty, injustice? Well, Jesus is about to give his answer, but not in the way you might expect. He doesn't give a lecture. Instead, he orchestrates this incredible, dramatic healing that starts with a statement nobody saw coming.
Okay, you've got to picture this scene. There are these 4 friends, right? And they are so desperate to get their paralyzed friend to Jesus that the crowds don't stop them. No, they climb up on the roof, start tearing it open, and literally lower their friend down right in front of Jesus. I mean, what an incredible act of faith. And Jesus sees it. He sees their faith. But here's the twist. Instead of just saying, hey, you're healed, he looks at the man and says, take heart, son, your sins are forgiven. He goes straight for the man's eternal, spiritual need first.
Now, to you and me, that probably sounds incredibly comforting. But to the religious leaders in the room, the scribes, whoa, that was pure blasphemy. And, they were right about one thing. The scriptures are clear that only God has the power to forgive sins. So for this man, Jesus, to say that, well, in their minds, he was claiming to be God, and that was a major problem for them.
But Jesus, he knows exactly what they're thinking, even though they haven't said a word. So he hits them with this absolutely brilliant question. He says, which is easier, to say, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up and walk? Now think about that for a second. Anyone can say, your sins are forgiven. It's invisible, right? There's no way to prove it on the spot. But telling a man who can't move to get up and walk, well, that's different. Either he walks, or you're a total fraud. There's no hiding.
And that right there is the mic drop moment. Jesus performs the miracle you can see to prove he has the authority to do the miracle you can't see. He basically says, so that you'll know the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, and then he turns to the paralytic and says, get up, take your mat, and go home. The physical healing was the absolute, undeniable proof of his divine power to heal the man's soul.
Okay, so Jesus has just shown he has the authority to forgive sin. The very next thing he does is show us who this forgiveness is for. And let me tell you, his choice of company is about to turn everyone's idea of religion completely upside down.
So Jesus is walking along and he sees a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. Now we have to understand just how hated tax collectors were back then. They were seen as the ultimate traitors. They were Jewish people working for the enemy, the Roman Empire, and they were infamous for cheating their own people out of money. And it's to this guy, this social outcast, that Jesus says just 2 simple words, follow me.
And Matthew's response is just instant. He gets up and he leaves everything behind. I mean everything. His job, his security, his income, all of it. Gone in a moment. And there was no going back. Once you left that job, the Romans weren't hiring you back. As someone once said, he basically lost a comfortable job, but he found a destiny.
So what's the very first thing Matthew does to celebrate his new life? He throws a party, and he invites Jesus over to his house, along with all his old friends. You guessed it, a bunch more tax collectors and other people the religious crowd labeled as sinners. Jesus doesn't just call one outcast, he goes and hangs out with a whole room full of them. This was a radical, radical welcome.
And this is where you really see the huge clash between the old way and Jesus' new way. The Pharisees see this dinner party and they are just appalled. Their entire system was built on staying pure by avoiding people they considered sinners. But Jesus' response just flips that on its head. He says, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I didn't come to call the righteous, but sinners. He came for the very people everyone else had written off.
Later they ask him why his disciples don't do all the traditional stuff, like fasting. And Jesus gives this great analogy. He says,
No one puts new wine into old wineskins. What he means is that the new, vibrant life he's offering, that's the new wine. It just can't be contained by the old, rigid, brittle structures of their religious traditions. You can't just patch up the old system. You need something entirely new, a new heart.
So Jesus is shown his authority over our spiritual sickness, our sin. Now we're about to see that authority kicked up a notch, extending to the most desperate physical situations you can even imagine. What we see next is this rapid-fire series of events where Jesus shows his power has zero limits, not over a long-term illness and not even over death itself.
This whole sequence is just incredible. You've got a synagogue leader, a really important guy, who interrupts Jesus, begging him to come because his daughter just died. So Jesus starts heading that way, but then he gets interrupted again, this time by a woman in the crowd. And through all of this, Jesus is the picture of calm. He's never annoyed, he's never in a hurry. He gives his complete loving attention to each person. It shows us that no situation is too hopeless for him, and no person is ever an interruption.
And let's just stop and think about this woman for a second. For 12 years, she had been bleeding. Now, under the law at the time, this didn't just make her sick, it made her ceremonially unclean. That means for 12 years, she was cut off from her community, from worship, from normal life. She had spent every penny she had on doctors, and she only got worse. Can you imagine 12 years of that kind of suffering and isolation?
And look at how Jesus responds. She had tried to just touch his cloak and slip away quietly, probably because she felt ashamed and unclean. But Jesus stops everything. He looks for her. He doesn't just let her go with a secret healing. He finds her, brings her out into the open, calls her daughter, and publicly affirms her faith. He restores her not just physically, but he welcomes her back into the community.
Okay, so all through this chapter, we've seen one incredible display of Jesus' power after another. But here's the thing, these miracles aren't just a magic show. They're designed to make you ask a question. They force a response. And we're about to see two totally different reactions, which really forces us to think about our own.
As Jesus keeps going, two blind men start following him, and they're shouting something very specific. They're crying out, "Son of David, have mercy on us." Now, Son of David wasn't just a nice thing to say. It was a title for the Messiah, the promised king from David's line. It's amazing. In their physical blindness, these men could see who Jesus truly was more clearly than the religious leaders with perfect sight.
And this really shows you the two paths people took in this chapter. On one side, you have the desperate, the outcasts, the people who knew they were broken, the paralytic's friends, the woman, the blind men. They all responded with this raw, trusting faith. But on the other side, you have the religious insiders. They saw the exact same miracles, but their hearts were so hard that they rejected it all. Their conclusion, Jesus must be doing this by the power of the devil.
So you have this mix of incredible faith and stunning rejection. And what has Jesus' gut reaction to all of it? Is he angry? Frustrated? No. It's compassion. He looks out at these massive crowds of people and his heart just breaks for them. He sees them as harassed and helpless, kind of like sheep wandering around lost with no shepherd to protect them.
And as he's looking out at this huge sea of human need, he turns to his disciples and gives them this powerful image. He says the harvest is plentiful, meaning the number of people who are spiritually ready and searching is massive. But, he says, the laborers are few. There just aren't enough people to go out and bring in the harvest. He sees all this need, and he immediately turns it into a call to action.
And that's where the message of Matthew 9 lands right in our laps today. See, this isn't just a history lesson about things Jesus did 2,000 years ago. It's a challenge for us to start seeing the people around us through his eyes of compassion. Who in your life, in your community, are the lost sheep? The people who are weary and scattered and just looking for a shepherd.
When you look back at this chapter, it's just filled with people who had this desperate, all-in kind of faith. The friends who tore up a roof, the woman who risked everything to touch a piece of his clothing, the blind men who wouldn't stop shouting for mercy. They all had one thing in common. They believed Jesus could meet their specific, desperate need. And so the chapter leaves us with a question for our own hearts. Do we really believe Jesus has the power and the authority to meet our deepest need, whatever that might be?